This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Notes Lukey, and on today's episode, the Tigers, a little bit pathetic right now. I gotta say it. And I have a little bit of mixed opinions on it, and I wanted to share them throughout the podcast with the Tigers, with a 9-21 record right now, not off to the hot start that I envisioned them. So we're gonna see, kind of do a little deep dive to see what is going on with this team, and what are some ways that they can turn it around this year. Hopefully everybody had a great weekend out there. The last 2 weeks, Nate Leopold, go back and listen to those episodes. Nate is my friend here from John Carroll. Of course, as I mentioned, I've mentioned to you guys plenty of times, I am the graduate assistant in the sports information department here at John Carroll University, which is a Division III Jesuit college just east of Cleveland. And, we have a lot of NFL connections and everything as well. And Nate, he wants to be an NFL scout one day. He's had some interviews with a couple teams already for different positions here and there. And, Nate, he's a really, really good guy, and he's definitely, very knowledgeable about his stuff with the Lions and the draft. So we had him on the last 2 weeks talking, of course, all the prospects in the NFL draft. And then last week, kind of wrapping up what the Lions did in the draft. So, go check those out. He was really, really awesome. And, I wish I could have him on every week talking football. But, right now we gotta talk a little Tigers. But before we talk about Tigers, I gotta say, this weather has been very awesome. And, hopefully it stays like this. Nice to get outside with golf. I've been golfing a lot the last couple weeks. And, that's been great as well. But how about this? And I know we don't talk about horse racing, on this podcast. That's, if you want horse racing, go somewhere else. But I gotta say, this Kentucky Derby, Rich Strike, the horse that won it this past weekend, he had 82-1 odds to win this thing. I think he just got into the race on Friday, like the day before. And the guy ends up winning the Kentucky Derby, arguably the biggest horse race, in all of horse racing. I was watching the video of, of course, Kentucky Derby, it's just one big lap around and that's it. And I saw the video, and, he was so behind the whole race. Then this guy, that jockey, he just made that move on the inside. And he was able to win. It is incredible, like, to see, in sports, we talk about, underdogs. This has to be one of the biggest underdog stories, not only of just the year, but maybe the last decade. A horse comes in 82-1 odds to win, literally enters the competition the day before of the biggest horse race of all horse races, and he wins. Pretty incredible. By the way, last year I was over down in when I went to nationals with our cross country team here at John Carroll. It was in Louisville. We actually were taking some pictures outside by the by the Churchill Downs, where they have the Kentucky Derby at. It was really cool. It's a really big place, and really cool to just kind of check out from the outside. And they have a lot of statues of old horses there and everything too. So. Rich Strike with perhaps one of the greatest comebacks, or one of the greatest upsets, I guess, in sports in the last decade. That's for sure. All right, Tiger time. So 9-21, they're 9 games back from Minnesota. They've only scored 85 runs this entire year. That's the second lowest in the MLB, behind, division rival Kansas City. This, I'm a little surprised. I'm not gonna lie. I've been very surprised at this slow and rocky start that this Tigers team has had. Now, I get it. There's been some injuries. Matt Manning on the IL. Casey Mize on the IL, pitching. Baez was out for a little bit. I understand the injury component. But when does it hit you that, maybe it's more than just injuries. Maybe this team isn't like we thought it would be. I mean, right now you look at the division, Minnesota 18-12, Chicago 15-14, Cleveland 15-15, and then there's Kansas City 9-18, and then the Tigers 9-21. I mean, at this point, they're aiming for a top 5 pick. I mean, luckily Cincinnati's the only team that's lower, 6-24. Oh my, are they? That's god awful. But I will say though, and I have a little bit of hope. The pitching looks better. I mean, they've only given up 116 runs this season. Cleveland's given up more. Kansas City's given up more. 31 run differential. If they had the offense to pair up with the pitching that's been pretty good this year, I bet this team would be better. Now, let's do a little deep dive into the stats. Tigers as a team are hitting 221. 221. They cannot get any sort of offense going whatsoever. Austin Meadows leads the team 293. So, Meadows, he's an everyday player. Cabrera 247. Now, what the Tigers were selling everyone earlier in the year was, Miggy's 3,000 hits, all that. But that's over. He got his 3,000th hit. And, but, we all know Miguel Cabrera isn't the Triple Crown Miggy that he used to be. We all know that this guy basically is just getting, maybe long singles now, maybe a little double here and there. I mean, he's got 1 home run, 9 RBIs this year. This team has had such a power outage. I think they've only had 8 or 9 home runs as a team. My gosh. Robbie Grossman, 231. Candelario, 206. Jonathan Scope, 157. Torkelson, 155. The Torkelson, oh my gosh, he's been disappointing. I mean, he started off the year okay. 3 home runs, 8 RBIs on the year, but hitting 155. Guys, I feel like he might be on his way down 75 south of Toledo. Just like his teammate Akil Baddoo. Seems like they figured him out. Akil Baddoo, I mean, he started off last season so hot, had such a great year. Now all of a sudden, he's being sent down to Toledo. Torkelson seems like he's going to join him, at least at this rate. It gets me upset a little bit because we as Tiger fans have been sold on this notion that these guys are going to be so good. Right? And look, I'm not saying that we, win right away. I'm not saying that. But what I expected was a little bit better performance by this time of the year. And like I said, I get the injuries. I get it. But, when does it just start becoming more than injuries? When do you start getting a little concerned with maybe the talent on this roster? Javi Baez. I know he's missed some time. I mean, Javi Baez hasn't been, terrible by any means this season. But there's just, and I get Riley Green's been hurt, and, who knows? He might have been a real big spark for the offense. I can't even collect my thoughts sometimes about this team. Because, like I said, we've been sold on this notion that these guys are going to be good right away. I mean, look, these, top 5 picks in the MLB draft haven't done much. Pitching-wise, Tarek Skubal. How about a 2.94 ERA? He looked good in his start the other day against the Oakland A's. 7 innings, only 3 hits, no runs. So Skubal's been having a good year. Eduardo Rodriguez. They call him E-Rod. Supposed to be the ace of this staff. 4.50 ERA in 6 starts this season. 4 home runs, 11 walks, 31 strikeouts. I expected a little bit more from E-Rod. I know he was a little up and down in Boston, but I just kind of expected him to take another step forward. But it just, so far it hasn't. I think he needs to settle in a little bit more. But I will say though, some of these guys in the bullpen, they're not like. The bullpen hasn't been like as bad, I think, this year as it has been in the past. I mean, you look at like guys like Michael Fulmer, 11 in the third inning, 1.59 ERA. I mean, he only given up 6 hits all year. The guy, of course, who had Tommy John surgery a couple years ago. Former starter, former Rookie of the Year. Willie Peralta, they used him more as a starter last year, more of a bullpen guy this year, 10 and a thirds. Innings, still hasn't given up a run. They're getting to the point now where Mize is on the IL, Manning's on the IL. They have to find some sort of, they have to get some guys up. So, that's what they've got, Joey Wentz, Alex Faedo. Faedo, he's had his start. And, Faedo, he had the Tommy John surgery from... I think it was a couple years ago. This is a former first-round pick for the Tigers back in 2017 from Florida. Saw him pitch in the minors for a little bit, but he was hurt for a little bit. 3.60 ERA in 10 innings pitched, 12 hits, only 4 earned runs. The 2 games, it was against Pittsburgh on May 4th and May 10th against Oakland. Both games he pitched 5 innings, 7 Ks against Oakland. So he doesn't. I mean, he hasn't looked terrible by any means, but he's one of the guys who's one of the top pitching prospects, in the organization right now. Michael Pineda, another starter that they got in the offseason, 3.43 ERA, 4 games started, 21 innings pitched, 20 hits. Bo Brisky's another guy that, Tigers have been a little high on. Joe Jimenez, 4.38 ERA, not as impressive, but I think they're going more with Soto out of the bullpen. He's got 4 saves this year, only 8 innings pitched so far. So, I mean, overall, like I don't think the pitching is the number one problem. I think the pitching has gotten a little bit better. Now, of course, as we talked about, Casey Mize, Matt Manning out. Mize when he was hurt, or before he was hurt, 5.40 ERA, only 10 innings, giving up over a hit an inning. Manning had just a 2.25 ERA and 8 innings pitched. So I don't like speculating about injuries a lot, but Matt Manning, I do. So I remember, or I'm sorry, not Matt Manning, Casey Mize. So I remember a long time ago when Pedro Martinez on the MLB Network, he was talking about Casey Mize, and you guys can go find it. It was right after the Tigers drafted him, I think, and Pedro Martinez said something about Mize's delivery and how he has that kind of that whippy arm motion and how his motion puts a lot of stress on his elbow. And what that means is, if you have enough stress on that elbow, it's Tommy John surgery. So like I said, I don't want to speculate about Mize, but I just, when I started hearing about his injuries, I started thinking about that video I saw with Pedro Martinez, and I remember thinking, I hope it's not something with his elbow. Because they got to be careful. They got to be careful, especially number 1 overall pick from a couple years ago. What if he shut down? Because say one of these guys has Tommy John, like Spencer Turnbull did. You just never know what's going to happen with these guys. If you could be like Justin Verlander and pick off right where you left off, you might even be better. But having the Tommy John surgery is very hit or miss. You could be even worse once you have the surgery. So, but just something interesting to think about with Mize. Just his motion puts a lot of stress on his elbow, at least from what Pedro Martinez was saying. So, go check that video out on YouTube. I think it's very interesting what he talks about as well. But the other thing too is we look at these prospects in the Tigers system. Obviously Torkelson, Riley Green. Riley Green's been hurt. Jackson Jobe, the third best prospect right now. He's currently in Single A. He was the Tigers' first round pick from last year. MLB.com has him projected with an ETA of 2025. So this is going to take a while. Of course, they drafted him out of high school as well. Dylan Dingler, the future catcher for the Tigers, progressing his way through the minor leagues, currently in Double A with Erie. Supposed to be around next year. So got the guys like Christian Santana, Ty Madden, Ryan Kleider, Isaac Pacheco, Roberto Campos. He's in Single A right now. Roberto Campos is the international free agent they signed a few years ago. They said he's not going to be ready probably till 2025. He's only 18 years old. Joey Wentz, we talked about him. He'll be getting his debut soon. And Faedo already had his. Maybe Cody Clemens pans out. Parker Meadows, the brother of Austin Meadows. I just, looking at these prospects, I just don't see a lot of hope. There's not enough guys in the system. Now, and I was thinking about this the other day. Do you think of the history of this team the last 20 years? Who do they have as GM? Dave Dombrowski. Who was the owner? Mike Ilitch. What was Mike Ilitch not afraid to do? He wasn't afraid to go out and buy players. Give them big contracts. You remember the Prince Fielder contract? He was getting paid every year up until a couple years ago. He was only on the Tigers for 2 years. Miguel Cabrera, obviously with his big contract. Verlander had a big contract. There were a bunch of other guys. So for years, Dombrowski as a GM was very, very good at getting the big name players. Now, I wouldn't say Dombrowski's strength was building in the farm system. I mean, you look at those guys from those really good Tiger teams, the guys that were in the system were Curtis Granderson, Rick Porcello, Verlander, Castellanos. Those were the guys that they drafted and were in the system. That was about it. Maybe a couple other guys that I'm not thinking of, but my point is, it was a small sample. Most of their really big name guys were free agents. The Tigers have just never had, or at least in this millennium, haven't really had a consistent farm system. So now all of a sudden, Al Avila strips it all down after Dombrowski, after the old man passes away, and Dave Dombrowski, gets fired. Al Avila comes in, and I just don't think Al is as good of a talent guy as Dave Dombrowski was. He was good at finding that talent and then signing them to the big deals. Look, I'm not saying I'm giving up on Al Avila yet, but until Al starts being like Dave and starts signing big time players, and I get he did it with Javi Baez, but he wasn't even like the top shortstop on the market this year. But once they start signing those bigger name guys, then that I think will cause me to start buying in a little bit more. Meadows was a start, but I don't know. I don't like. I'm a very patient person. I'm a very patient sports fan. I'm willing to kind of wait out a rebuild, but the Tigers have been rebuilding since 2017. Do you think that they'd start to show a little bit more improvement, which they did last year? But this year, I thought they'd be off to a way hotter start, and they just seem like they just can't get the bats going. And I think this might be a wake up call to Al that there has to be more talent, on the field, in the bats. Got to be more guys who can hit for power. And it's funny because they signed Meadows, and I think part of it was for his power. And it hasn't been there. Meadows was signed, I think, for some of the reason he was signed was because of his home run power. That hasn't sparked at all. Torkelson for his power. He's done nothing the last few weeks. He's, like I said, he might be sent down to Toledo, it seems like. So I understand the injuries, but at some point you just got to think, do you question Al Avila with some decisions? Maybe that'll be next year. Who knows? Maybe next year Al Avila will just throw it all in the pot and start going for these really big name guys. I haven't looked at the list for the free agents next year, but it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Look, I'm not giving up on the Tigers season by any stretch. I'm not, and like I said, I'm a patient guy. I don't want to give up, but there is a little bit of concern, I should say, especially after that sweep to Houston, losing 3 games in a row by a score of 3-2. So like I said, the pitching is there. I mean, only giving up 3 runs, that's not bad. But just, it has to be a little bit more consistent with the bats. At least they were able to get that 6-0 win against Oakland the first game of the doubleheader yesterday. They got Oakland for 2 games, then the Orioles at home. They go on the road to Tampa, go to Cleveland, Minnesota, and then play Cleveland at home, and then Minnesota again at home. So I think this month of May is going to really determine the Tigers' fate. And once they get Mize, Manning back, I think this team could kind of start to take off a little bit, maybe in June or July. Maybe they'll just start to peak, but I don't want to panic now. I don't, but I'm not going to lie to you and think that and say that I'm not having questions about this team. I definitely have questions, but just very, very concerning. A little bit here, especially with the bats. Pitching, I'm not as concerned with, but the bats, definitely, for sure. All right, before we close out the podcast, I do want to talk a little bit about this Adrian Payne story. Of course, Adrian Payne was a center for Michigan State in the early part of the 2010s. Great player for Tom Izzo. He passed away a couple days ago. He was actually shot and killed in Orlando. And, when I saw the news, I was extremely sad because Adrian Payne was actually my favorite Michigan State player from that era. I just really, like, when you're young, like I was, like, in middle school around that time, you kind of, emulate players that, are like your same position. So, when I was younger, I played center, and I remember really, like, emulating Adrian Payne. Like guys like him and Draymond Green was a little bit before him. I would, on the court, like when I'm playing at home against my friends and everything, I would pretend like I was Draymond Green or Adrian Payne, like one of those guys. And I really respected Payne, especially with the whole thing that he did with Lacey. If anyone remembers, she was the little girl who had cancer. Who was kind of like an honorary member of the Michigan State basketball program. And, I remember watching a lot of features on it. And Adrian Payne was like that player who really took Lacey under his wing. And he was really close with her family and everything. And, then she ended up passing away a little bit after of cancer. And then, when I got the news about Adrian Payne passing away, I just, I immediately thought of Lacey and, the impact that he had on her and her family. And, she passed away, and, Adrian Payne passed away as well. So, just a very, very sad moment. And it really threw me back to the days of when, Payne, the House of Payne, as I like to call it, with Michigan State. So I think, kind of teaches us that life is, don't take life for granted, especially with a guy like Payne. And, he was playing overseas, I believe. He kind of fizzled out in the G League a little bit, but he was he was playing overseas. I think he played in China for a little bit, and I think he was maybe playing in Greece now, or one of those European countries, I think. But just a very, very sad news when I saw that. And like I said, a guy who I kind of looked up to as a kid on the court, and I really, really liked when he played as well. So just some sad news coming from the MSU basketball community. A guy that was a true Izzo type player, and very, very sad news from this past weekend. But so to end on a little positive note for the podcast, make sure to check out all the other great content on the podcast network. The Michigan podcast, they just dropped a new one. Go listen to that. Also, the Doc and Jock, the Fan Report, all that covering the Lions. I know the Pistons a little bit, the draft coming up in June, and, so much more on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. And I'm going on 2 years now. Next month will be my 2-year anniversary, I guess, of hosting podcasts on here. And we're getting closer to episode 100 as well, just about 6 or 7 more away. So really looking forward to when we celebrate episode number 100 pretty soon. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next week only on Open Mic Night.